Guys, I need to know if my audio is working. So if you guys can give me a thumbs up to tell me that the audio is working, because I'm using my camera up there, so it may change a bit. Can you hear me? Yes or no? Can you guys hear me? Okay, cool. Thumbs up if you can hear me. Audio's okay? It's not too bad? Oh man, I had notes here. Hold on, let me grab my notes. Cool. Okay, first up, where is everyone from? Good morning from Utah. All right, we'll give a few more minutes. I'm doing okay. You know, it's Sunday morning. It's a bit cloudy here in the city. It's not like it was yesterday. It was a bit sunnier yesterday, but you know, winters here can often be just a lot of dark and gray skies. UK, probably very similar to UK weather right now. Wow, Philippines. Welcome. I'm excited to go through our propagation. First, I want to talk about like my propagation box, and then talk about how that method works, making a propagation box, give you guys a tour of the plants that's currently in my box, and then just answer any questions you guys may have about it. So, any updates for the rubber tree you propagated last year? There's a video coming up on my ficus, but for now, I want to just focus on propagation box. So, for the most part, when you propagate a plant, there's so many methods you can propagate a plant. You can either do it through, you know, taking a cuttings and putting it in water, which has always been my preferred method, especially when it comes to pothos or string of hearts. However, propagation box has become a very it's quite a bit of a popular method right now, especially for wet sticks or plants that are humidity-loving plants, like your philodendrons, your anthuriums, and certain your alocasias. So what a propagation box does is it traps the humidity, and it allows kind of then it promotes a lot more growth because there's so much condensation that's taking place within that box, right? So it's almost like a mini greenhouse. So that's why I've really like experimented and really love doing propagation box. But yeah, so that is what I want to do today. Hello, hi, Northern. All right, so first up, I want to talk about like how what you need to do a propagation box. You obviously need some type of container. I've used like Tupperware or takeout containers, Tupperware in the past, and you obviously need like moss, right? Sphagnum moss. So sphagnum moss, you can pretty much find it like at your local plant shops, boutique nurseries, or even on Amazon. But if you are going to get sphagnum moss, I always recommend to get the ones that are like long. Like you can see here, this is long sphagnum moss, right? They're not like breaking into pieces. This is good quality sphagnum moss, so you definitely want to make sure you have good quality sphagnum moss. So this is like New Zealand brand. So I've gotten a few off like my local plant shop or even at nurseries. And if they don't have any, my last resort is Amazon. So Amazon does have New Zealand brand, but you want to get some good quality moss. Thanks, man. Looking forward. Binge watching soon again. I'm drinking orange juice, by the way. I'm just kidding. So sphagnum moss comes dry. It can be compressed or it can be like loose. This was loose. This was in a box like this. This I got off Amazon, but this one I got off like my local pack shop. So it's compressed and this thing expands, right? Cool thing about sphagnum moss is because it retains and holds so much water, but at the same time providing a lot of air pockets. So it really does prevent your plants from rotting. So I actually use sphagnum moss also as a potting medium, like for my anthuriums and whatnot. But yeah, I need to get some moss. You can get sphagnum moss at places that sell, yes, reptile or places that does like terrarium type of pets. You can definitely get sphagnum moss. You're sure you don't need to go to like a plant shop. Good suggestion. Can I get no leaf using water only? So You can probably no, I would suggest you put it in a prop box, because especially if it's a wet stick and there's no node or aerial root yet, you want to kind of develop that. So I would put that in a prop box. No leaf, no node. There's definitely a node there. It's just hidden right now. So that's one thing why I like spraying the moss, because it retains water and it allows like air pockets. So that way, you still get oxygen through it and whatnot. When you create a prop box, the key thing that I always often get the question is, how wet should the moss be? In a prop box, what you want to make sure happens is you want the moss to be wet, but not like, I prefer mine to not be like soaking heavy moss that you can, when you lift it, it's dripping water. But at the same time, you also don't want it to be like light and fluffy and damp. You just want it to be in between. So that's where I typically have my moss. Like if I ring this, you can see there's already water draining through, but it's not like heavy when I lift it, right? I gotta like ring it to get that water. So that's where I kind of like my moss to be when I'm putting in a prop box. But if I was using this as a potting medium, I would ring it a little bit more to make it a little bit more light, because I'm using it more as a potting medium versus a prop box. Because you still want this to have water when you put it in your box. And again, I'm using this, I got this at the dollar store. Just lay like an inch or two, an inch and a half of moss, because you still want that water. See, this is like wet right now. See, I don't want it to be like this. I'm still gonna ring it a bit, just a bit, and then I'm gonna put it in here. Because you still want the water to be in here, because when you close the lid, what you want to happen is condensation to take place in your prop box, right? So condensation is a good sign that your prop box is working and that those plants in there are developing, growing roots or growing new leaves and whatnot. Sorry, I'm not reading the questions yet. I'm going through this, so hopefully I'll be able to get through a few of the questions. Okay, so that's how I prefer to have my moss in my prop box. Not on the dry or damp side, but not on the like soaking wet, dripping water side, just in between. Because what you want to happen, here's one. You see, this is condensation that's taking place right now. So this is a good sign that your prop box is working. That means there's enough water in here, there's enough humidity, and it gets enough light for it to kind of evaporate and create that condensation that's taking place. If there's no condensation that's happening, it doesn't necessarily mean there's not enough water here and you got to go water your prop box. It just maybe mean that you're not giving it enough light or enough like warmth or heat in order to create that condensation or evaporation that's taking place, right? So just be mindful of that. It doesn't necessarily mean you got to go water it right away, because oftentimes I actually don't need to water my prop box because there's enough water there to kind of just continue the cycle and get trapped in there. So I'm gonna pause right there for now and just gonna go see if you guys have any questions. Love your content. Heat mat underneath mine, so I have to add water every so often because the heat. Yep, that's absolutely, because the more warmth and the more heat there is, if you're adding a heat mat under your prop box, you'll obviously want to water that. So you do want to check just to make sure that the water's not evaporating too quickly. Are super prone to rot. Should I stop closing the lid? Okay. So this is a number one question, is how do you prevent rot from your prop box? I've never really experienced any rotting in my prop box, and I always have my lid closed. And I think the key thing to that is there's a few things. A, you want to make sure that your moss that you're putting in there is good quality. Second, you don't want it to be that soaking wet that I was telling you about. You want it to be at least like, in between from damp to soaking wet, and you want to be at least light, and you don't want to be packed in, because if your moss is packed in, it's preventing a lot of air to kind of filter through and go through the moss. So you just want to make sure it's not super packed in. And then the third thing I would say is your cuttings. You want to make sure your cuttings are nice and healthy. If you're putting a cutting in there that's not healthy, whether it has like a bit of fungus issue or some disease or some rotting that's going on, your sphagnum moss will rot, if that makes sense. So you got to be careful with the type of cuttings you put in there. Hopefully that helps. We just started. You guys can always watch the replay. Oh, for those of you guys watching this in the future, turn on the live replay so that we can follow along, and feel free to comment and interact in the comment section. And then for those of you guys watching live, give it a thumbs up. All right. Okay, so that is how I go about like prop box? Question: heating pad for your prop box. I've never used heating pads because I have south-facing window, floor-to-ceiling window, so I can control the temperature in my home, and it gets enough like adequate light and warmth to be able to create that condensation in a prop box. Like even my mini Tupperware right here, you can see all this condensation that's taking place. And that, you know, this, I haven't watered this in like almost probably a month. And actually, so I think what's in here is, let's just take a look. Oh yeah, my variegated string of hearts cuttings, a butterfly method. So that's what's in here. Hello. Are there any alternative sphagnum moss in making a prop box, or can you use other medium? I've heard that you can use like perlite. I've never personally tried perlite yet. Something maybe I want to experiment this year. I know other creators out there have used perlite as a propagation method, but personally for me, I haven't tried it yet. Alaska. Oh, thank you, Thelma Thrip. Just got back into plants. Love your videos. Thank you. Well, you know what? It's crazy though how many people who used to love plants and then get back into it. I think it's great. But thank you. What's your favorite plant right now, Thelma? How often do you open a box? So how I often open my box, probably, it depends on the plant that's in there. Sometimes I'll check like every 2 to 3 days, and I'll just open it, check to see, make sure the cuttings are okay, make sure there's no rotting that's happening. Maybe that's another thing too, is because if there is rotting happening, I probably like try and eliminate that rotting that's going on, so that way it doesn't spread, right? But I would check it maybe like every 2 or 3 days. So it's just a matter of me just making sure they're okay. And then when you're checking, you're allowing the air to kind of go through, but I don't like leave it open. I always close my lids because you want that condensation to take place. Coarse perlite. Hi, Aki. Thanks for the help. Thelma Thrip, those are great. Wait, I missed her plant. Hold on, let me go back there. Oh, I didn't see her. Oh, love plants. Oh, palms are great. Okay. Which medium would you recommend for pole, sphagnum moss or coco coir? I've never used coco coir, so I can't say that works better than sphagnum moss. I just always use sphagnum moss. Okay. So any further questions on prop box, how it works, how you should water it? When it comes to watering my prop box, I actually don't water. I actually don't water it. I have a mister. If it's starting to get more on the drier side, I'll like just mist it, so that way there's just a bit of extra water. If it's super, super dry, then of course you want to water it because you still want to make sure the condensation is taking place. Thanks, Belle. Belle. Appreciate that. So you guys ready for the tour? Any other questions? From Germany, which medium would you recommend for pole? Oh, I already answered that question. Yes, okay, let's do our tour here. I'm not liking this lighting, so I'm going to change this so that way you guys can see the plants slightly better. Hold on, let me try something. Never mind, I can't change it right now. We're gonna have to deal with it. I should just put it in auto. Okay, so first up, we have our, so I just get bins from like takeout containers or even like a dollar store. You don't need to go crazy expensive on bins, but I have a few cuttings, the Philodendron brandy. So these originally were in a prop box. And then when the root starts developing, I kind of moved them into their own little container and then still put them in like a mini humidity dome or prop box just to make sure that they continue to kind of have that environment. But I'll show you the prop box that these guys are in. So this is a brandy. And these brandies were originally here. So this is how I originally had the brandies, all in here. See how this prop box is? So you pretty much put a wet stick. So these were originally wet sticks. And a wet stick is pretty much, so this is a philodendron. It's pretty much a piece of vine, right? And you have a node, which is the middle piece where those aerial roots are going to show. And then you just lay this flat in the prop box, close the lid, and then it's going to produce these roots and then leaves, right? So this is a brandy. So this is what I originally had, those ones in the pot container. So there's about 5 in here right now, and then I moved 2 out of the prop box and moved it into their own little container, and then we did that. Oh man, the silver sword is actually upstairs, so I didn't bring it down here, but that one's doing okay. I can't believe I never thought of using takeout. Takeout containers are great because there's a reason why restaurants put food in takeout containers. It keeps it warm. It keeps that, flavors inside. So they work great. Would normal wooden stake work for pothos and hardleaf philodendrons? I mean, they just probably wouldn't. The roots probably just won't grow into the stake without any sphagnum moss, if that makes sense. But you can get them to wrap around it. You just kind of need to hold it up and tie it with like garden tape and whatnot. Okay. Now we'll do our big one. Alrighty. So in this huge, so I got this at the dollar store for like $4. It's 3 liters. Again, my layer of moss is there, and you guys can see condensation is taking place. Condensation, you guys can see here. This is, all the plants in here are loving it. They're thriving, and it's so cool, the stuff that's in here. All right. So the plants I put in here are mostly philodendrons, and they start off as mostly as a wet stake. Again, this piece of cutting, piece of vine with a node in the middle, stick it in here, lay it flat, and good luck. See what happens. But you guys can see right there, they are doing really, really good. So first up we have here, I'm going to take it out. I'm going to take it out with some moss because the roots have already grown into the moss. We got this Philodendron verrucosum. So if you guys remember, I bought this verrucosum over the summer, and it didn't travel well. At the bottom of all the leaves at the bottom started to yellow. So I knew what I had to do. I just pretty much cut the top cutting, planted in sphagnum moss, and that plant now is doing well. It's well rooted. It's beautiful. It's growing new leaves. But then all the bottom vines, I chopped it off and then tried to propagate, and this is the result of one of them. So this is one. We got another one here where the leaf is just unfurling. I was watching this one yesterday. You guys can see this leaf is just unfurling right there. Another verrucosum. Yeah, storage containers from Walmart works. And then, we got this one too. This one's doing really well. I don't know if I can remove it without removing the roots. Yeah, we could. This has already second leaf growing. You guys can see right there. So that verrucosum that I bought, and these plants, these are a little bit more fussy. They're not necessarily cheap. They, now that I can like get 1, 2, 3 plants I just showed you out of that one plant, which is another great way for you guys to like make more plants. And then this was the bottom of that plant, because the bottom I cut off. You guys can see here's like the base of that bottom, and then 2 shoots came out of it. So these are 2 individual plants, and there's 1 baby shoot right here. So that's one of the things cool about plants is like, even though some plants may be expensive off the start, if you're experienced or if you are comfortable with propagating, you can like make more, and you can like, make your money back, if that makes sense, right? Because you can do this off a trade, and if there's plants you guys want to get that you don't have in your collection, or you can sell it, right? So that is what's the verrucosum right now. Any questions? I like your pronunciation of verrucosum. Am I pronouncing it right or what? Okay. What do you do with all your propagation? So how often do you water the monstera you put sphagnum moss a while ago? Oh, that's okay. So we'll talk about sphagnum moss as a potting medium in a second, but I just want to finish off the prop box. What was the other question before that? I forgot already. What do you do with your propagation? So after a while, when these roots, similar to the philodendron brandy that you guys saw in its little potting container, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna then move them out of the prop box, putting them in a potting, in a little nursery container, and then still seal them in a propagation box or in like my greenhouse, just to make sure they are still comfortable, or transition from like a prop box more into like a bigger greenhouse that doesn't necessarily have like high humidity, because the humidity levels in a prop box is probably gonna be like 100%. But this is one of the melano. If you guys remember my melano video, I have so many melano cuttings off that one melano that I got last summer, because it gave me so much grief and so much problems that I was kept cutting. And now we're getting a lot of baby melano plants. So really cool. There's a lot in here. Again, this is a wet stick, right? It's just a piece of stick or vine. There's a node right there. This is actually a jade satin wet stick. So I was actually trying to see if I can do a full video in Tagalog. I don't think I can. Okay, any other questions? Meron bang mga questions? Why does my propagation produce tiny leaves? It has to start off as tiny leaf. Sometimes it starts off as a smaller leaf depending on the plant. Like for example, this is a melano. I just showed you a melano with like 3 leaves. This is one with its first leaf off a cutting. Look how tiny that is. Sometimes they start off as small, and then the second leaf will be bigger than the previous leaf, and so on and so forth, right? So it really just depends on that cutting and kind of what it produces. Also, the lighting you give your propagation box, you want to make sure you put this in an area that gets a lot of bright, indirect light, and even a few hours of like direct sunlight, because it is a bit covered, it's a bit shielded, so there is a bit of filter, especially when you put the lid on, and especially when there's light condensation that's taking place. Yeah. Do you stick those prop totes under lights or under the bed? You want to make sure you provide a lot of lighting for your prop box. You got to make sure you provide a lot of lighting for your prop box, because lighting is such a big factor in how big your plants grow. If you don't provide lighting, you're not going to get any plants. How do you propagate in water? Often cuttings develop little roots. So certain plants, I do prefer to propagate in water, like pothos. Sometimes string of hearts I like to do in water if I want to keep the length of the string of hearts. If I don't want to do butterfly method and I want to keep a bit of length, I'll do water method. But when it comes to vines that don't have any leaf, like these are wet sticks. You can see here, this is a jade satin. There's like a gazillion in here. I'm gonna put this in a prop box. Do you have any? I don't have any of that. Separate. Are you emotionally strongly attached to these tiny plants? Do you give them away easily? You know, it's funny because I was actually, so a few of my cuttings that I showed you guys, the melano, the verrucasum, the philodendron, I'm actually doing a little fundraiser for Alzheimer's Society of Canada. So I'm going to create a propagation box with a whole bunch of cuttings in there. So there's going to be like a brandy cutting, a melano cutting, and a verrucasum cutting. And then each of those cutting will include like a Hoya cutting, either an Angleriana, a Sunrise, or a Parasitica, a pothos cutting, whether it's my neon or my pearl and jade, some string of hearts, and a surprise cutting. And it's going to be a propagation box, and I'm going to sell it to raise money for Alzheimer's. So it's hard for me to let go because I am a bit emotionally attached to them, because you work hard on them, right? Like you watch them grow up, I guess, in a way. It's like selling your kids. I mean, I'm sure some of you guys want to sell off your kids. I'm just kidding. I'm proud of philodendron cutting in prop box. Do you think it's okay? I put philodendron cuttings in vermiculite in a prop box. I don't know. Like vermiculite, I'm not familiar with that as a propagation medium, to be honest. How do you recommend propagating plants that may have had root rot? My philodendron wasn't doing well. Again, if your philodendron has root rot, the base, and you want to propagate, then just take the top cutting, do mid cutting, top cutting, and then put in a prop box. Anybody needs kids. That's funny. Okay, so, and there's going to be like jade sats and synapses cuttings in that prop box cutting that I'm selling. I was talking about like water propagation, and pothos are great for water propagation. String of hearts are great for water propagation. Synapses, I find, really takes a very long time to root. So I actually started to try and do prop box with these synapses. As you can see here. So it's a piece of vine with a leaf and a node, obviously. And we're going to put this in a prop box. That's pretty much what it is. And you just close it, and you want to make sure that there's condensation that's happening. If there's no condensation, check to make sure there's a lot of light and warmth that it's getting. If that is happening, then just make sure that your moss is moist or a little bit more on the wet side. Okay, what else was on my notes here? We did a tour, how prop box works. Any other questions so far about propagation methods? Wow, there's 347 of you guys in here. Are there any pest issues? No, I've never personally experienced it. The only pests, because for the most part, your cuttings should be pest-free when you put them in your prop box, because most pests will attack like the leaf and the foliage. And obviously you want to make sure that your vines are clean, healthy, and safe before you put them in the prop box. The only pest that may happen in there, but I've never seen it. I've never seen any, what's the word I'm looking for? Fungus gnats like in there. I've never had any pest issues in my prop box. Is there any effect cutting an internode too close to the nodes? It depends how close. Like if you want to make sure you still leave a bit of space for that new growth to shoot out off the node, if that makes sense. I mean, my rule of thumb is at least leave a bit of, the width of your pinky, on the top and below the node, to be able to at least get a shoot off that node, if that makes sense. Is it possible to propagate a wet stick using soil? Okay, any other plant experienced people in the chat group who can answer that? I don't know. I've never put a wet stick in the soil. I just don't know. How long you leave them in the box for transfer soil? Okay, good question. So okay, so let me take a cutting. So the brandy cutting as an example. We put this in the prop box. It grew leaves, and obviously this already has like a bit of roots, right? You can technically take this, even though right now I can't even see I can see slightly the roots when I lift it. I can see it attached to a bit of the moss, like you guys can see here. Technically, I can probably put this into its own little pot right now with sphagnum moss still, and then put it in a box like this, and then it'll grow taller, and eventually the new vine will have its own nodes and aerial roots, and that will then produce roots that will like start growing down, and then eventually this pot, if I take this out like in a month or two, will have a whole bunch of roots around it already. As long as you continue to use your moss as a potting medium in your container to help develop the roots, because that's another thing with like moss I actually use as a potting medium to help develop roots from cuttings in water. For example, my monstera cutting, I was rooting it in water because they root really, really well in water. But I didn't want the roots to continue to grow in water for like long periods of time before I transferred to soil. So then I put it in sphagnum moss as a potting medium to try and grow those roots. And I did a video on this, so check it out. And then from there, I'm able to move that into like more of an aeroid or soil mix once the roots are a little bit more healthier. Hi, Sherry. Wow, watering. Who else is doing like plant work right now? Are you a musician? Where can I see you play? My grandpa was. So my grandpa was probably my big inspiration with everything. He was the businessman in the family. He was a plant guy in the family, and he was a musician in the family. Unfortunately, I got 2 out of the 3 out of those. I tried the whole music thing. I have no. I'm tone deaf, and yeah, that's as far as I go. I'm at work. Me, I have my string of hearts, prop box, butterfly method. So should I separate each little piece and plant it in soil? What you can do with your butterfly method of string of hearts, for example, these were the variegated ones. You can see that, oh no, I just made a mess. No. Okay, I'm gonna clean this up. You can see they're starting to shoot out, their own little like vine. You can just pot a group of them into like a little nursery pot, so that way your top can be full, and then from there it can like grow really really long, like similar to this one right here. That's what you guys can do. I'm potting. Okay, what are your thoughts about taking cuttings in the water of high growth season? I think propagation honestly is okay to do all year long, regardless whether it's growing season or slow growing season, as long as you can provide the adequate environment. A bit of lighting, a bit of warmth. They're going to be okay. They're not going to go into crazy like shock or anything like that. So it's okay to do it. I'm currently repotting all my plants in front of the TV. Thank you. Alrighty, well, I've just been giving a philodendron mycans cutting for leaves. Hello. Hey, Natasha. Mycans, I got a cutting off a trade with my mycans, and it's doing really well right now. It's in its own potting medium, so it's doing pretty good. Alrighty, so we spoke about prop box, how it works, how often to water it or not water, key important things, lighting, make sure you see condensation, and making sure that your cuttings are healthy. You use good quality sphagnum moss, and that you're not, if you see any fungus that's going on there, remove that section out of it so that way it doesn't spread. Maybe I need to do some repotting too. All right. What else I got for you? I don't know if I have anything else about my prop box. I am doing a little. Oh wait, let me show you guys. So similar to the Melano ones in the big prop box you guys saw, similar to the brandy, after a while you want to remove it and pot it in its own container. So here's one of those Melanos that just dropping moss everywhere. I also put it in its own little container in moss, but now it's developing roots all over. If I remove this out of it, let's see if we can see. I like usually to do this. Yeah, you can see there's a bit roots like all over throughout the moss now. So this is feeling a little bit more comfortable in its own little home, and eventually you can then, if you feel comfortable with your philodendrons in more of a soil or arid mix, do that. I'm personally starting to feel a lot more comfortable in moss now, to be honest, especially when it comes to anthuriums or philodendrons, like these ones. The ones that love humidity. Either just Mabuhay. Oh, while you're all here, we're gonna do a little promo. So for those of you guys who don't have my coloring book, our next color and sip night is February 19th, and we need a plant to color. But it's fun because we do it through Zoom, so that way I can see you guys, and you guys can interact with me, and we color, we drink, and we get to know each other. But I'm thinking we color for February 19th, we color the Sis is this color. I think this will be cool. But yeah, so get a coloring book. Just kidding. Do you use fertilizer for propagation? No, I do not use any. That's another thing too. Some people have said, even in propagating in water, I've never put fertilizer because I know a few of you guys have done it. I think a friend of mine done it, and what it does, it forces the leaf to grow a little bit unnatural, if that makes sense, and it's like a little bit, it's not good. So I would never put fertilizer in any propagation, whether you're propagating in water or in a prop box. It's not, yeah, that's personally for me what I would do. Can I leave them potted in moss for a long time, or do they need soil? You can leave them, if you look at a lot of like research on aeroids, there's a mixed bag. Some people suggest you can grow aeroids their entire life in sphagnum moss. Some prefer more of a soil. The only thing with sphagnum moss is they decompose over time, right? So decompose obviously means that they're gonna hold a little bit more of the water than they used to. So you just got to be careful of not making sure that it's not sitting in water for long periods of time, that it's gonna, rot the root. Because eventually, old moss, 10 months old, will decompose. They're gonna hold a little bit more water. So that's why some people actually put sphagnum moss in a terracotta pot. So that way it prevents that, if that makes sense. So it's just about managing it, I guess. I've never put a thermometer in my prop box to measure the temperature, but I'm gonna assume it's between like 25 and 30. Similar to like my greenhouse. My greenhouse is about like 28 degrees. Depends. Sometimes it goes down to like 25. I'm so late. I thought I missed it. No, you haven't. We're all just hanging out now. Did you guys give this video a thumbs up? Huh? Just kidding. I didn't put my hat on. I need to cut my hair again. Give myself another quarantine haircut. All right, so I think we're done with the prop box. We can do a bit more FAQs and hang out a bit. Not too long because I need to use the bathroom soon. It's a problem with like drinking orange juice. I'm just kidding. I'm just an hour or so north of TO. It's freaking cold this week. It's gonna be cold this week. I actually have a shipment of plants coming in this week, and I'm really concerned that it's gonna hit right at this snowstorm or this weather that's coming. So I'm crossing my finger it arrives on time and doesn't get too much in shock. Okay, do you reuse sphagnum moss? Good question. So as I was mentioning, sphagnum moss over time will decompose, and eventually you're gonna wanna replace that, right? Similar to soil, when I'm repotting, I will actually reuse a bit of the oiled soil if it's not too old and if it hasn't lost its nutrients or it's decomposed. So similar to like to sphagnum moss, I would do the same thing. If it's still decent sphagnum moss, you can tell. You can tell the difference between like old moss and like decent moss that's still fresh. When they're a little bit like, when they're holding the water longer and it's a little bit darker, then it's starting to decompose, if that makes sense. So you kind of just want to be mindful and take a mental note of like when did you use this sphagnum moss? Was it like a week ago or 10 months ago? So how to help a plant if it gets too cold? Use heat mats. Have you ever tried to buy plants from Etsy? Thanks from Montreal. I've never bought plants from Etsy. I think most Etsy sellers, there's a mix of Etsy sellers. There's either local Etsy sellers, like private sellers like you and me, or there's overseas sellers, because they market on Etsy, they'll market on eBay, they'll market on all these platforms to sell their plants, right? So you kind of just need to know the difference of what you're getting. Do you just remove the old moss or do you have to change the whole thing? I just remove the old moss. Like if I was to, so I've never, I guess the only time I would change the moss is when, for example, my potted up, philodendron silver sword that's currently in a pot with moss. By the time I need to repot that, the moss has already decomposed and probably needs fresh moss, right? So eventually I'm just gonna remove as much of the old moss as possible and then put it into new moss. That's if I want to keep that plant in sphagnum moss. We covered a lot about prop box, sphagnum moss, how that works. I'm just answering kind of random questions now. In water propagation, you change water to keep in such a pour from above when water level drops. So there's actually a mix. I read there's mixed description on water propagation. Should you change the water often? I personally don't change my water. I just top it up when the water like goes down. And that's because there's like nutrients in, this is my theory, so, and I agree with someone, I think there's like algae and nutrients that's happening in the water to help grow those roots. So I personally don't change it with fresh water. That's just me. I always just top it up, to be honest. Okay, what are your thoughts on using root hormone powder? I've never used them, so I can't make a comment on whether they work. It maybe some of you guys have used them. You know, definitely let the group know. Do you use bottom heat? Why is my plant losing leaves? I can't answer that question because I don't know what you did to recently for it to lose leaves. Did it change? You do something different to it? Did you water it recently? Did you not water it lately? I don't know. Cinnamon is great for cuttings. It's good to definitely prevent a lot of like rotting and whatnot. So, leca propagation thoughts. I've never used leca. I know a lot of people out there do. I don't know if any of you guys have. Maybe you guys can offer suggestions. So hard for me to comment on it. I know a lot of people use leca as a growing medium, aside from obviously as a propagation medium. And like I said, if you're comfortable with something, stick to it. And if your plants are doing healthy, stick to it. You don't need to go try, even though I encourage you guys to try and experiment, but only try and experiment if you're comfortable doing it. And if you understand kind of the method of how it goes about it, if that makes sense. But if your water becomes cloudy, would you then change it? I mean, if it's obviously like dirty and like you can't see through it, go change it. Good cheap like you would recommend, or just a few small, or just a few small succulents. I mean, you can literally put like a grow light bulb and get one of those cords and like just hang it on top of your succulents. Those are really cheap and affordable. So Spain moss I have no luck with. I think if you guys are struggling with Spain moss, you kind of need to, again, condensation is important. If you're not seeing condensation in your box, it's not working. So it's either you're not giving it enough light or there's not enough water in the sphagnum moss. But just kind of how do I make it happy? Can I propagate? Okay, I've done a lot of videos on Ficus elastica. Just check those out. A lot of information there. So, do you think the Guardians of the Galaxy use moss propagation box to bring root back? Great question. I love that. Okay, so it's funny. I got asked this question. I'm like, "Who's your favorite Marvel character?" And I'm like, "Well, I gotta love Groot, obviously, but that is actually a really interesting question." I love. Okay, if you bought moss and it's already like moist or wet, it's probably not good, if that makes sense. Something happened to it, so you might want to contact your whoever you bought it from. Southwest Ontario. Hey guys, wow. Alrighty, so from Vancouver, man, it's I'm a bit upset that it's gonna be like 43 minutes long. So for those of you guys watching the replay, turn on the live replay chat so that we can follow along with the questions. And for the rest of you guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up since you're already here. And we'll hang out. If I don't see you guys, I won't see you guys on YouTube, but you guys can check me out on Instagram. I'll probably jump on right away. But have a good day, good night. We're gonna take off here. Okay, fine. Final 3 questions. I will answer 3 more questions. Because I also need to use the bathroom really bad. Okay, never mind. We're going now. There's a delay here. Thanks for all the tips. All right, people. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. You guys are awesome. I'm going to end the stream. Have a good one, and we'll see. Wow. Secret to success, that's Ring of Hearts. Get one that's fully like if you get a 6-inch pot, make sure it's full at the top. If you get a 4-inch pot, make sure it's full at the top. If you get a 2-inch pot, just make sure it's full at the top, because eventually that's going to grow into more strings and more vines. Okay? Good night, good day, and have a good weekend. We'll see you guys soon.